Hey everyone, it's Darren Gibson from Southpaws. You know the holiday season is just right around the corner, and if you have that certain person that likes their coffee and you don't know what to get them, I've got the solution for you. A Southpaws coffee cup. That's right. We've had our own coffee cups for a number of years now. They're made of thick ceramic, so it keeps your coffee or your hot chocolate hot. They're made 100% in the U.S. with union labor. Get them for $15 plus shipping by sending your name, address, and phone number to southpawsradio@gmail.com, and I'll get a hold of you. Make sure you hook up those special people in your life with merchandise from Southpaws and help support independent media and the First Amendment.
For the hardest-hitting show in talk radio, the true progressive voice since 2012. This is Southpaws.
And welcome to Southpaws on the Pacifica Radio Network. We are the leaders of the revolution. My name is Darren Gibson, and I'm your co-host.
And I'm Katy Steele for Jack Prince.
And we are recording on Friday, November 6, 2020. We just started recording at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. We're still waiting final results from several states. As we start coming onto the air here, Joe Biden has now taken the lead in Pennsylvania.
Yes, we've been waiting for that. He looks like he got the lead in Georgia overnight.
Yep, he has the lead in Georgia by just over 1,000 votes. He's still holding on to the lead in Arizona.
Yep.
I believe he's leading in Nevada, too.
Oh, yeah. He won. That's what's happening here, is we are watching a win. Not that doesn't mean we don't need to count every single vote and make sure that these results are certified in every state. But I'm very confident and very comfortable that Biden rightfully won this election.
Yes, we go with science on this show, not superstition, not the rantings and ravings of an orange-skinned bastard.
Fascist bastard.
Thank you. So we'll pick apart the election in just a minute here. Before we get started, a couple of reminders that you can follow us on social media by going to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. You can follow us on Twitter at Southpaws Radio. You can follow us on Tumblr at southpawsradioshow.tumblr.com. You can also find us on YouTube by doing a search for Southpaws Radio. You can become a patron of the show by going to patreon.com/Southpaws Radio. You can listen to the show anytime you like at Spreaker.com. Do a search for Southpaws there. You can find us at Stitcher.com by doing a search for Southpaws there as well. You can find us at Apple Podcasts by doing a search for Southpaws. And once you found our logo, you found us. Links to our podcast are automatically sent to our Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, and YouTube accounts. You can listen to us on Global Community Radio Channel 1. We're on every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern. Check us out there. You can also listen to us on great Pacifica stations, including KCEI-FM in Taos, New Mexico, and KZGM in Kabul, Missouri. And let me just put this out here real quick. We know that we have several Pacifica stations that take us on an automatic download. If you're one of those stations and you want us to mention your call letters and where you're from, please shoot me a message. You can find my email on the Pacifica website is for the broadcasters. It's really easy. One other quick shout out that I want to give before we get started with the meat of today's show. I want to wish a happy birthday to a friend of mine who's also been a former guest co-host on this show, Katy J, who has been itching to get back on this show. Unfortunately, our schedules haven't quite meshed up yet. But hopefully once the coronavirus pandemic is done and over with, or at least halfway under control, that we can broadcast with her safely, then we will have her back on here. Happy birthday, Katy. By the way, she called me election night. We talked on the phone for about 2 hours. It was awesome.
Happy birthday. We can never have too many Katys around here.
No, no such thing. All right, so as it stands right now, the Electoral College has Biden at 253. Trump is at 214.
They're being generous.
Mm-hmm.
Really generous, because if this were Bernie, I'm just going to say it because I can't help myself. If this were Bernie, we already know that the mainstream media on every side from every direction would have declared him a big fat loser like an hour after the polls opened. If the numbers were exactly the same here. But it's not Bernie. It's Donald Trump. And we have to keep in mind that he is a dangerous narcissist.
And let me add that the numbers would not be the same if it was Bernie. It would even be a larger win.
Absolutely.
With more states.
Yes. And they would still find a way to make that look like we were horrible. We were all horrible. So.
Exactly. And for an example of that, we only have to look at 2 of the congressional races. And we might as well go with the good news. All 4 members of the squad have been reelected handily,
which
to their
we knew
positions.
Would happen. Sorry, I'm so excited about some of the good things, and I'm also excited about the bad things, because I think what Darren's about to tell you illustrates everything that we've been saying.
Yeah, so let's stay with some of the good stuff here. Rashida Tlaib was reelected to Congress out of Michigan's 13th district. Her win this year, she received 77.9% of the vote. That's coming from the Michigan Secretary of State website. It is official. In 2018, she won 82.4% of the vote. Now, you're probably thinking, well, her popularity went down a little bit. No. This is kind of what happened. In 2018, there was no Republican opponent for her. She ran against the Working Families Party and the Green Party. That was it. In 2020, she had a Republican opponent. She had a Green Party opponent. I believe the US Taxpayers Party. I don't know if the Working Family Party did or not.
So it was her personal amazing record and her incredibly important voice over the last 2 years that gave her those numbers, which in times like these, you got to be pretty astounding to pull that out with that kind of competition. So
exactly.
Kudos to Rashida.
Yes. And in New York's 14th congressional district, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez won again. Big time. In 2018, she received 57.13% of the vote. In 2020, she won 68.8% of the vote. When you have a progressive agenda, when you have a progressive platform, you know what you can call yourself if you're running for office? A winner. Every single time.
And I mean, we use the P word, but let's be honest here. I have never been so proud to be a bartender. It's not just progressive values. When you put somebody in office who has had a real job, who has lived in the world that 90% of us are living in, where we're not making enough money to pay our bills and we're working more hours than we can even stay awake, that's what matters. So run for office. Tell your friends to run for office. If you don't want a fascist nation, you know, full of right-wingers, then it's going to be you that we need, all of you. So please do that for us.
Exactly. And that brings me to a point that I want to bring up. A lot of people, even in Michigan, there were more presidential votes cast than there were for the U.S. Senate seat, which, by the way, Gary Peters won re-election there. John James is failing to concede the election. He wants a recount. No, you're a loser, John. Go back home. Go fly the helicopter back to your home.
Can somebody go do a sketch of the Rugrats and put like John James and Trump on all their faces? Yes.
Oh, jeez.
That's literally who they are right now. It's such a joke.
But it stresses a point. We're not just voting for the president.
No.
Down ballot is important. Where do you think everybody started before they got to a federal level? Some of them started at the federal level, granted, but Gary Peters was in the Michigan legislature. Rashida Tlaib was in the Michigan legislature.
A lot of these people started out on school boards.
Yes.
You know, you start out in your city, in your community, and you work your way up from there. And the good ones started out on school boards, because if you haven't been in those positions, you don't know what the hell you're doing in a higher one.
An example of that, I know you're not really that great of a fan of her, but
there's a lot of those, so it's okay. Go ahead.
But Michigan Supreme Court is now 4-3 in favor of the Democrats.
Oh, yep.
Because Bridget McCormick was reelected as Chief Justice, and Elizabeth Welch, who is a former East Grand Rapids school board member, was elected.
And I did vote for both of them because, you know what?
So did I.
I'm very critical of all of our public officials. I reserve the right to be, but I'm not crazy or stupid.
Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we still have a lot of dumb people in this area. Bill Huizenga, my representative, unfortunately got reelected. Fred Upton got reelected down in Kalamazoo after a horrible smear campaign against John Hoadley. This was the most disgusting smear campaign I've seen in a very long time.
Makes my blood boil because I really like John Hoadley, and it's not easy for me to find representatives I like.
Tim Wahlberg got reelected. In the 3rd District, which is where we're recording this show,
in hell,
Peter Meijer squeaked by, but this was probably the closest election I've seen in this race in decades.
Yeah.
Peter Meijer squeaked by Hillary Scholten.
And we're going to pay for that dearly, friends.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
a
good thing for us.
Oh, absolutely. It's horrible. You know, this is a guy with no political experience whatsoever.
Got a lot of money and a lot of military experience, and that's it.
Trust fund baby, because granddaddy and great-granddaddy built a grocery empire in the Midwest. I'm just going to call it like it is. This is not good. You'll find it out, but the people in the 3rd District, they just love him because he's got an R after his name.
Well, let's keep in mind they love him also because the Meijers go hand in hand with the Van Andels and the DeVosses, and they have back to the beginning of our city and county governments. So they've all infiltrated the power there long before most of us were born.
Yeah, and as I've mentioned, I think I've mentioned it on this show. If not, I will. In the case of Peter Meijer, the apple fell pretty far from the tree because I was told by a very reliable source, actually somebody that used to do a radio show on the station that we used to be on, that in the 70s, Fred Meijer was a big supporter financially of the Wobblies. Can you believe that?
I've heard a lot of really good things about Fred Meijer. But I grew up in Greenville, Michigan, which was where the first Meijer Star was born.
1934.
Yeah, and Fred Meijer wasn't born an oligarch. He did build that up from being a neighborhood supermarket to being the Midwest chain that it is today. But I believe it's his oligarchic and devious children that really, cemented them in with those other families and manipulated the government.
There is a great article, if you want to get to know the history of Fred Meijer. There is an old article that was published in the Grand Rapids Press. The Sunday edition used to have the Wonderland magazine. I don't know if you remember that.
I do remember that.
Go to the main Grand Rapids Public Library and look on their microfilm of the Grand Rapids Press for the Wonderland magazine, where they had a very lengthy article, very in-depth, about Fred Meijer building up Meijer from a supermarket chain, because Meijer Thrifty Acres, which is now the Meijer
28th
chain, it used to be two separate. There used to be the supermarket chain, and then Thrifty Acres used to be completely separate.
Oh, okay.
Thrifty Acres almost went out of business and almost took the grocery store with them, because Fred could do business with all the grocery store suppliers. Everybody knew his name, but the clothing distributors, the automotive distributors, the hardware distributors,
when you start going overseas and stuff,
they're like, who the hell is Fred Meijer?
Yeah.
Why would we sell anything to him? Who is he? And it almost drove the company out of business. They finally merged everything, and of course things have grown. But when Fred Meijer built the 28th Street store, and for that matter, the store on Alpine that's been there forever, he had the floors poured, I believe it was either 6 inches or 8 inches. The reason was, if Thrifty Acres went under, then he could sell the property to somebody who could use it as a car dealership. That's why the floors were poured so thick in the first few years of Meijer.
And that has me questioning. I'm going to tell you right now, I've done a lot of research, and the one thing that ties me, when I go through history, that ties the Meijers with the Van Andels and the DeVosses is manufacturing, right? Because, okay, Fred Meijer was selling all of this grocery food. He was buying it from farmers. They were packaging and reselling, right? PFAS. That's what they all had in common, was PFAS. And when you look at where the locations of their places are, there's some very sketchy, environmentally polluted areas, like over there right by the golf course and where all the rivers go through, right? It would make me go, okay, if you keep the zoning the way it is and then you just plan on making it a used car dealership, then you never have to worry about people developing homes or such there. So just another thing to think about.
Absolutely. So, yeah, bad news that Peter Meijer was elected to Congress. So we'll find that out over the next few years.
Keep an eye on your water. Keep an eye on your local government, your county and your city, because like I said, I really think these people, have been not only stealing our resources, but also covering up the fact that we've all been poisoned. When your best friends own the hospital, it's real easy to avoid that accountability.
All right, I want to pick your brain about something. This is Justin Amash's seat. Where do you think he's going?
Now, this is something I have been very concerned about. I think we all need to look at Tecton very closely right now. That is his manufacturing company. And keep in mind, he has always been an importer and reseller of Chinese tools.
Absolutely, he has.
Yet, right now, he owns a very large manufacturing facility right in the heart of where all of our defense manufacturing happens. For the DoD, which there are a lot of Grand Rapids privately contracted companies doing work right now for the military. Not only are we redoing their air mapping GPS system, but we're also got a bunch of airplane contracts, helicopter contracts, things we're building here. So my concern is that Amash is in bed with the Chinese right now, and that is why he doesn't want the focus on him and does not want his seat any longer.
That could very well be.
That's my biggest fear.
This is on top of the very public defense contractors that we have in town.
Exactly.
GE Aerospace out on Patterson Avenue being the major one that pops right in my head.
Was it DynCorp? There's so many different companies right now that are, and so many of them are, not owned by Chinese corporations, but maybe Americans who used to be in China, or there's a lot of connections there. So it sketches me out a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. The other bad news, unfortunately, Lindsey Graham got reelected. Even worse than that, Mitch McConnell got reelected, which
sorry
wasn't a surprise. The Democrats pushed Amy McGrath down Democrats' throats down in Kentucky when they had an actual progressive.
Gee, I wonder how we could have avoided all of this happening. Can we talk for a second? Just a second.
Go ahead.
We've discussed turnout a little bit, right? And how the presidential turnout this year was huge, right?
Oh, absolutely huge.
How interesting is it that if you go back 4 years and you look at the down ticket turnout versus the presidential turnout, it was completely the opposite. Completely the opposite. Everybody that went in, they all voted the down ticket and couldn't vote for the president.
I am glad that you mentioned that, because that's something that I preached on this show ever since the 2016 election. 140,000 ballots just in the state of Michigan. Either skipped the presidential election or they wrote in a candidate that was not eligible as a write-in because they did not file the paperwork with the state of Michigan.
But they
140,000.
Yep, but those people all voted down ticket. They drove to the polls or filled out their absentee. They sent it in and they voted for every other option. So now here we are this year, and we've got a completely unexciting candidate, but not necessarily somebody people can't vote for, like 2016. And what do? They all vote for the president, and everybody ignores the down ballot. So what do we got to do, guys? I don't know. Maybe the thing that Darren's been telling you to do for the last 4 years. Maybe put up a progressive candidate. See what happens when you bring people out and actually have somebody address the issues they care about.
Exactly. And this is something that I want to bring up here. The major television networks have not called Arizona for Biden, but the Associated Press has.
Right.
So according to the AP, Biden's up 264 to 214. Yet ABC, CBS, NBC have him at 253 to 214.
Well,
what is up with that?
Fox still has him at 253, right?
Yes.
Okay, so the reason for this that I see is that clearly Trump is a narcissist. And altogether, cumulatively, everybody knows this. Not just the left media, but the right media, okay? So what they need to do is come together with a opinion that's been, agreed upon by all of them, which is that Biden won Arizona, okay? So the Associated Press is telling you the truth. Why? Because they're going to say, all together, we're going to give you this. But if you have any one of those independent outlets report those numbers before this thing, the lawsuit or whatever that he's, then he's going to come out and make it a partisan thing. In my opinion, that's what's happening. So I think that the press itself, in the interest of maintaining free press, is going, okay, we have to come together and tell the truth here. And then we don't want to necessarily, poke the bear. So I think even CNN and MSNBC in their reporting are being very careful about what they say and the words they use, which not going to lie, it stings. Having been through the last two primaries as a Bernie supporter, to see the Democratic Party give more respect to these Nazis and their right to democracy than they've given any of us, that's hard to watch. It's hard. But I also understand that we are looking at the risk of a fascist authoritarian government, and he has the power right now to just push a nuke button, use some military and do what he wants to do, and we have got to get out from under that before we deal with the other stuff.
As a matter of fact, I have this from the Independent in the UK. According to their sources, the popular vote, Biden 50.5%, Trump 47.8%.
So he's got the popular vote. He's got the Electoral College.
Here's the raw numbers. 73,523,524 for Biden. Trump right now, 69,635,844. They have called this, the networks have said, this is the largest turnout, I believe, as a percentage of population since 1900.
And keep in mind, they would have, if this was just a primary, they would have called this the day of the election. And even in 2016, when Hillary lost, those votes weren't all counted. I woke up and that election had been called. I woke up and everybody in this country knew, everybody in the world knew that Donald Trump was our president. Okay, they called it before those votes were counted, and he claimed victory before those votes were counted. Now, I'm not saying we should do that now, but what I am saying is that we should also understand that we won, and we should stop talking about when they finish, what if. We won. He can go to court in every single state he wants to.
Yep. He has in some states.
Yeah, and that's okay. He can do that. He has a right to do that, and that's fine. But don't let them take the narrative, because that's all he's fighting for. He knows he lost. He's fighting for the narrative right now, not the numbers. We don't have to give it to him.
Yes, exactly. And I'm doing a little bit of calculating right now just to see how many more people total voted just for those two candidates, just for the Democrat and for the Republican.
Because at least there was two candidates on the ballot that they could pull the trigger for, which they couldn't in 2016.
Yes, exactly. So it's looking like just under 15 million more people voted this time.
15 million!
14,320,637 more people voted in 2020 than in 16. And we're still counting votes.
Yep.
Oh, and by the way, they're still finding votes in the US Postal facilities. I got an alert. 1,800 more ballots found in Pennsylvania at a US Postal Service facility.
Interesting.
Let me correct that. 1,700. This is the New York Post. We'll see if that's any accurate, because the Post is
the Post.
Very conservative. Yeah, the fish don't even like to be wrapped in it.
Since we're talking about turnout, I have to say this because I've heard it a couple times, but definitely not enough. The cities with the increased turnout, the cities that really came through and helped us flip states. When you're talking about Philadelphia, when you're talking about Detroit, when you're talking about all of these black cities, can we talk about the black voters that came out and saved us from a fascist dictator? Because all we've done is blame them
for the last, I don't know, at least 100 years that I can remember, every time an election doesn't go our way, it's always the black people didn't turn out, the black people didn't turn out, the black people didn't turn out. Well, guess what? They turned out.
They turned out this time. And then actually, since we're talking about the black vote a little bit, let's go back and do a little bit of history. Let me ask you this question. In light of the popular vote versus the Electoral College, especially, there have been 4 times where the candidate has won the popular vote but did not win the Electoral College. Mm-hmm. Here's my question. Is it time to get rid of the Electoral College?
Oh, hell yes. It's been time to get rid of the Electoral College. The Electoral College gives way more representation to the people in the rural Midwest than it gives to the people in urban, heavy populated areas. It's been that way since its design. It's a way to oppress the vote of the working class.
It was originally used to oppress the vote of the black
people, yes.
Black people.
Which were the working class, let's keep in mind.
And the poor.
Yeah, and it's always been that way.
Because if you remember the history of this country, well, I don't know if history is taught anymore in schools.
No, it's not.
But the history of this country, if you didn't own land, you didn't vote. Period.
Oh, and guess what? That's becoming the future of the country now.
Exactly.
Because who matters right now? Do you have a voice if you go into your city council meeting and you're a renter? You can get up and give your 2-minute comment, but nobody has to listen to you.
Oh, let me just go a little bit further than that. If you're homeless, how are you going to vote?
Oh, no, you can't because you're in jail because you're trespassing. No matter where you're at.
I'm talking about the homeless that are like at Mel Trotter. What do you use for an address? You don't have a home address. You're homeless.
Mm-hmm. But that's the thing. Now they can't. If they leave Mel Trotter, they're trespassing. Mm-hmm. Even public property, they're arresting homeless people for trespassing because they don't own private property to go to. Like, it is so sick.
It is.
And that's when I look at my own neighborhood. Did you know that if you get the majority of property owners in any specific area to agree on, can't think of the word right now, but from basically leaving a city and going to the other city closest.
Oh, seceding.
Seceding from the city and then just maybe joining the other city or township. That's all you need is a majority of the property owners.
Or being annexed.
Right. So if they have, big developers come in and buy up a bunch of property, they can literally just change the lines of your city. They can do whatever they want.
Absolutely.
It's getting really out of control, this whole oligarchy thing, friends.
It most certainly is. And this kind of gets into the next question that I have, just to kind of ponder a little bit here. Looking at the number of people who voted for Trump, and this is up almost 7 million people. 7 million more people voted for Trump in 20 than in 16 at the time that we're recording this show. What does this election say about our society when so many people, knowing who Trump is, he's a liar, he's a pathological liar, he's psychotic, and people still voted for him? What does that say about our society?
I thought about this all night because you asked me this last night when we were talking about what we were going to discuss today. And I think what it says about our society is that we are really, really fucking scared. All of us. We're all really scared. We're scared of different things. I think that the people on the left are really scared of fascism and bigotry and militarized police and, poverty. And I think that the people on the right are scared of poverty, and they're scared of war, and they're scared of losing their freedom, and they're scared of losing their power.
But the thing
their power is really the one thing that they see being threatened. And I think that fear is driving them to listen to their leader and do what he says, because they believe that that's the solution, and they need a solution. They need to save themselves and their power, and they're scared. They're just as scared as we are, but they're handling it differently.
I'm also going to add this. I think it says as a society that we have become extremely, extremely selfish.
Apathetic and selfish. Yeah, absolutely.
And I'll do a little history lesson here. This starts right at the feet of Ronald Reagan, because the me generation started in the 80s, and it hasn't let up since. They have pushed the accelerator pedal.
Yep. I was born in 81, and this is all I've ever known. That's it.
And that's the problem. That's what a lot of people have only known this. They don't have generations to look back on that grew up in the 30s and 40s that pulled together when this country was at war with 3 different countries trying to save the world, literally,
and trying to save people that were vulnerable and being, just massacred for no reason. That was the last honorable war. That's what I've said it a lot of times.
But now we have students in high school that don't believe the Holocaust ever happened. I tell you what, you say that in Germany, it's automatic. You go to jail. They've got a law there. If you say that the Holocaust is a hoax, it's straight to jail because they don't want people to forget that this ever happened because there were so many complicit people.
And that's how history keeps repeating itself, is we don't learn from the past. We just move ahead, but it's not on purpose. And that's the thing. It's strategically designed that way. If you don't understand who hires the historians, then you probably think it's some conspiracy theory. But no, it's the oligarchs that hire the historians. They decide what they're going to write. They decide what's going to be spread around. They decide what they're going to teach at school. So you have a responsibility to pay attention and know whether or not they're feeding you crap or whether you know the truth.
And the other problem is the winners write history.
Exactly. The other ones aren't around to.
That's exactly correct. And I'll just say it. I keep harping on this show. Violent conservatives. Violent conservatives. The conservatives are violent. No, I'm not skipping you. You're violent too because you support Trump. You support him, you're violent too because you've either turned a blind eye to it or you don't care.
This is the most important part of today's show because we've talked about who won and we've talked about how important the narrative is, but we haven't talked about the consequences for not pushing the narrative, for not certifying these results, for not making sure we know who the states are sending as electors to the college, because all of these things are absolutely imperative to making sure he leaves office, to getting him out safely without thousands and thousands of people being injured in a violent uprising. Because his people believe him. They believe what he's saying. They believe they're being robbed, and they believe he deserves to stay in the White House, and they're wrong. So we have to use science and math, and we have to prove that one state at a time. And I know that's a lot of work when we feel like we've just gotten done and we should be done. Did I just see?
I'm just.
Did I just see that?
I'm trying. Let's hold off on this for a minute because I have not received any confirmation anywhere else. Business Insider is showing that Joe Biden has 273 electoral votes. Joe Biden is the next president. I have not seen this confirmed anywhere else,
Nope.
So we're not going to get
They just put the numbers on the screen in front of our faces. I'm trying not to get too excited, but again, the timing here is impeccable because yes, we won. Yes, the numbers are going to prove that, but we have to go through state by state and prove it to these people. They deserve to know their votes counted and that they lost, and they deserve to know that in a transparent way. So
Absolutely.
We have to make sure that happens.
Absolutely. We're looking to try and find confirmation of this. If Business Insider is correct, it looks like they've called Pennsylvania for Biden because the numbers would add up.
And 3 days ago, I've been very confident and very comfortable this whole time because I have friends who are really good with the math thing. I'm not so much, but they've broken down for me how this is looking and what we needed to do to win. And I was confident we covered it. I'm still confident. We're waiting on the confirmation yet from the Pennsylvania call, but...
And the reason that I had even brought up Business Insider is that I have this story from Thomas Colson talking about the violence of the conservatives. Listen to this, folks. Steve Bannon, Donald Trump's former senior advisor, has been banned from Twitter after saying that he would put the heads of Dr. Anthony Fauci and FBI Director Christopher Wray on pikes outside the White House. Bannon made the comments Thursday during an episode of War Room Pandemic, a podcast that he co-hosts. After falsely claiming that Trump had already won the election, Bannon discussed how Trump should behave in a hypothetical second term toward Wray and Fauci. In comments which were reported Thursday by Media Matters, Bannon responded, quote, "Second term kicks off with firing Wray, firing Fauci. I'd actually like to go back to the old times of Tudor England. I'd put the heads on pikes, right?
Jesus.
I'd put them at the two corners of the White
Jesus.
House as a warning to federal bureaucrats. You either get with the program or you're gone. Time to stop playing games. Blow it all up. Put Rick Grinnell today as the interim head of the FBI. That'll light him up, right? End of quote.
He should be arrested.
Yes, he should.
He should be arrested right now.
Absolutely. Jack Maxey, his co-host, responded, quote, just yesterday there was the anniversary of the hanging of two Tories in Philadelphia. These were Quaker businessmen who had cohabitated, if you will, with the British while they were occupying Philadelphia. These people were hung. This is what we used to do to traitors, end of quote. To this, Bannon replied, quote, that's how you won the revolution. No one wants to talk about it. The revolution wasn't some sort of garden party, right? It was a civil war. It was a civil war, end of quote. After Bannon made the comments, Twitter suspended the account linked to the podcast War Room Pandemic. YouTube removed the video from their site. A spokesperson for Twitter told Business Insider on Thursday that Bannon's War Room Pandemic account had been permanently removed for violating Twitter rules against the glorification of violence. A YouTube spokesperson told Business Insider that the video had been removed from its site because it incited violence. Facebook on Friday said it had also removed the video from its platform. A spokesperson said to Business Insider, quote, we removed these videos for violating our policy against violence and incitement, end of quote. Toward the end of the podcast, which is live streamed on YouTube, Bannon insisted that his comments had been a metaphor. In the now removed video, Bannon said, quote, our YouTube has been taken down, end of quote.
Okay, hold on. So it was a metaphor, even though he literally and specifically said, nobody wants to talk about it, but that's what it is. The Civil War was violent. It was a war. It was a civil war. So you're not talking about a metaphor when you specifically point to the war part.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Here's what else Bannon said. Quote, it's been taken down because of my comment today about Fauci and Ray getting fired, and what they should do afterwards is put their heads on pikes. That was obviously a metaphor. End of quote.
How is it obvious?
How can
a metaphor for what? What is it? Like, what do you do to somebody that is comparable to putting their head on a pike after you've already taken them out of their job position? Mm-hmm. He's saying after we fire them, we should put their head on a. So what were you comparing it to? What was the metaphor?
You know what this sounds like? These are the same people, the same terrorists. I'll just call them.
They're terrorists
that plotted to kidnap and kill Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Yeah. Plotted to kidnap and kill Virginia Governor Ralph Northam.
They practiced. Like, how are you practiced?
We just had this story last week about some Republicans, these conservatives, looking to kidnap and kill Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. That was just on last week's show. These are violent people, violent conservatives. There is no such thing as a nonviolent conservative.
And they want to fund the police more to put a bunch of technology to track down violent people, which is all very confusing to me.
Oh, you mean like ShotSpotter in Grand Rapids?
Yeah, I love how the conservatives are so scared that somebody's going to come take their guns, but they're totally good with the cops knowing every time they fire it. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, these are the same people that call for law and order that are calling to break the law.
Yeah.
Sorry. Both Fauci and Ray have angered Trump in recent months. Dr. Fauci has offered stark assessments of the threat coronavirus presents to the U.S., prompting Trump to speculate at a rally last week that he may fire him. Trump is also considering firing Ray as FBI director because he failed to open an investigation into Joe Biden, which Trump believed could give his election campaign a last-minute boost, according to an article from the Washington Post. These people are insane. This is what you people sound like. It is.
It's a trip, Darren. I remember like 5 years ago when I first started speaking up about politics. The reason I finally became confident was because I realized how stupid the people already running everything were. How completely dumb and embarrassingly ignorant. And Trump has done nothing but illustrate that point.
Yep. Apple News is now calling Arizona for Biden, but they have not called Pennsylvania for Biden.
Interesting. That's okay. All right.
Yep. So.
Well, here's the thing, friends. We won. Okay, we won.
But we got to ease these people into this, all right? Like we've got a narcissistic, immature, childish, fascist dictator with a nuke button in his hand right now. So we're just going to slowly disarm him. And then we'll toss him out the White House.
Let me just read this. This friend of mine shared a screenshot on her Facebook last night because she responded to a anti-Joe Biden meme. Somebody that lives in her area responded this way. What a shit rebuttal. Typical Biden supporter can't give a good reason to elect the guy other than your TV told you to hate the orange man. And believe me, I'm not having any kind of meltdown, just doing what us redneck true Americans do. Buy ammo and remember where the Biden supporters live. If shit hits the fan, they go first. Good luck to you and yours, because I can guarantee there are people in every town that noted where the pedo supporters live. Hope you sleep good at night.
Yeah, that's a direct threat of violence. It's a direct threat that they're going to come and shoot anybody that's publicly supported Biden. And that's terrifying. And I have to, if you don't mind, Darren, I just want to tell you for a second about my friend Ayman, who, went through the Arab Spring in Egypt. And he is basically saying that our job right now is to make sure we count every single vote. Mm-hmm. We certify every single state, and we make sure the electors going in have democracy in mind, because this is a slippery slope, and it's very comparable to what we've seen happen across the world in similar situations when they ended up with fascist dictators. So
absolutely,
we don't want a Führer.
And I'll read another comment. This guy made a comment on his personal Facebook page. Apparently he was at a gas station and didn't like that the clerk had told the customer, put a mask on so I can serve you. Says there was a prime example this morning at the Shell station, and I'm not going to mention what city, on why you don't push the mask on people. The majority of us are ready to get the lime and shovels out.
So that's a threat of death, of murder.
Mm-hmm. Cool, you did your job and told your customer he or she had to have a mask. They refused. Oh, well, you did your part as a store clerk. Now move along before you cause other problems you can't control.
Wow.
Yeah.
So if you're on unemployment, I'm really sorry, then you're a lazy, bag. But if you're at work, then it's your job to enforce their political beliefs, or you're endangered there too. You can't win.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I made sure to pass along this guy's information to my friend so that she could contact the local authorities. So yeah. The violent conservatives need to either stop being violent, or they need to go bye-bye to jail directly.
Yeah, and not as, an employee, but as an inmate.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Because, yeah, we need a clarification on that.
Sadly enough,
sure.
We do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but there have been so many updates to this. The whole process, there's been challenges. Niraj Waraku wrote this for the Detroit Free Press on November the 2nd. On the first day of absentee ballot processing at the TCF Center in Detroit, police removed 2 poll challengers. One, a man wearing a horror movie mask who shouted that the ballot processing was crooked. The man, who did not give his name, stood in line and identified himself to election workers as a poll challenger. Poll challengers are allowed on site for both of the parties. Starting at 10 a.m. Monday, poll workers started processing, though not counting yet, absentee ballots from Detroit. The man in the horror movie mask had credentials to be a poll challenger, according to election officials, but he started to cause a commotion, shouting the process is crooked. He wore a mask that looked similar to the mask worn by the villains in the movies Halloween and Friday the 13th. Speaking Monday afternoon at the Detroit office of the Secretary of State's office, Secretary Jocelyn Benson said that Detroit police acted properly in removing the 2 unruly people. So this was the day before Election Day that this had happened. Another poll worker was removed because she refused to put a mask on. Or not a poll worker, but a poll challenger.
Okay.
They are supposed to be 6 feet away from poll workers because of social distancing requirements and must wear a mask. So, yeah, they got rid of her. She's been identified in the Detroit Free Press as 61-year-old Robin Bozensky of Southgate. She was causing a commotion at a table where poll workers were processing ballots. Her mask was not covering her nose. She was asked to cover her nose with the mask. She refused the request. Police then asked her to leave, which she did. So that's what's going on, folks.
What's going on? It's pretty much what we've been saying was probably going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm feeling encouraged, I'm not going to lie, because we knew that this was going to be difficult, right? We knew we were going to get to this point. We've done the things we absolutely had to do to avoid a worst case scenario, which was, it was close. It was close. This should have been a landslide. A year ago, Biden was polling 10 points above Trump, like everywhere. So it was close, but we did what we had to do. Now we just need to finish. We need to finish strong, and then we can go back to taking on the left.
And you know what? That brings up a question that just popped into my head. Is it time to get rid of polling?
I think that now that Trump is calling polling, specifically addressing it as his words, quote, election interference, I think we've got a real problem, yeah. And honestly, I do think it was election interference. I think if you want to do polling, you have the tools to do that yourself at home. And you can poll any way you want. But to have the media do it, it is election interference at this point. And I don't like when Trump looks right.
And I'm also going to say this because somebody brought it up on one of the local news broadcasts. Might have been on the national news. That there are people that were solicited for polls that gave false information because they supposedly don't want to be associated with Trump, right, even though they support him. They're embarrassed to be supportive of him.
We've also got that issue with the people who are closest to him right now.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know what they're telling him. A lot of people are scared to admit to him that he's losing.
But it wasn't just that at the TCF Center, the old Cobo Arena.
Oh, that was at Cobo?
That was
at
Cobo.
I didn't realize that. Okay.
Yeah, they've changed the name to the TCF. They got naming rights.
Okay.
TCF Bank, who I'm not a fan of. You've heard the story on the show about the guy that they refused to give service to and called the cops on him because they thought he was passing a bad check. It was actually a check he received. It was a check that he had received as a settlement from a racial discrimination lawsuit. So he's now suing them for racial discrimination.
Oh, gotta love it.
Yeah. But that wasn't the only thing that happened outside of the old Cobo Arena. Wednesday night, there were people outside trying to get in, stop the count, and the cops had to show up and kick them out. And
because we can't let the black people vote.
Yeah.
Then everybody's going to know that, America doesn't want Donald Trump.
Yeah, and apparently there was a story somewhere that members of the Republican state legislature were asking for the National Guard to be called out to stop the count in Detroit.
So they really wanted the National Guard to come and stop democracy.
These are your Republicans, folks.
Yeah.
These are your violent conservatives. They don't give a shit about your rights. They don't give a f*** about you. You better start realizing that. They don't give a f*** about you, as Carlin would say.
Maybe you don't read history, and maybe you're in the military, and maybe you support Donald Trump. And maybe he's going to tell you to go out and stand up for his right to steal the White House. Well, I just want you to go back and maybe read one chapter of history. Go read about the brown shirts.
Mm-hmm.
Go read about what Hitler did to them. Okay, how they got rewarded for all their good work. Go read about that before you do anything.
Yep. And then I have this story. This was published at Raw Story, but it was originally published at the New Civil Rights Movement website. This is David Badash on October 30th. A top Florida congressman just tweeted out video from inside a Miami post office that shows what appear to be an out-of-control sorting facility with mail-in bins and boxes in no discernible order, which, by the way, they're supposed to label those bins. Postmaster General Louis DeJoy for months worked to slow down the processing and delivery of mail, and this video seems to show he was successful. Florida House of Representatives Democratic leader Keone McGee said, quote, mail has been sitting for over a week, end of quote. Also noted, quote, mail-in ballots are within these piled up bins on the floor, end of quote. Then he said, quote, speaking with a resident within the area and being told some in the area have not received their mail from the below-mentioned post office in 5 days, end of quote. Because this is intentional. And just to let you know, folks, a federal judge has ordered a sweep of all postal facilities, and DeJoy is trying to fight it.
He doesn't want people to see what actually happened.
Well, here's the thing. The judge has the power to throw DeJoy in jail. No trial, no nothing, straight to jail.
That would be the best thing that could happen to us at this point. Because when I started seeing that Trump was actually planning on using these private companies like FedEx and UPS to help pass out this vaccine that he's touting that's just about to be ready, that was when I realized that Louis DeJoy is a lot more powerful than any of us really knew, because that's scary stuff.
Yes, it is. I want to get to this story. This is the Washington Post from November 4th. This is Jacob Bogage and Christopher Ingram. Nearly 7% of ballots in U.S. Postal Service facilities on Tuesday were not processed on time for submission to election officials, according to data the agency filed Wednesday in federal court, potentially leaving tens of thousands of ballots caught in the mail system during an especially tight presidential race. The Postal Service reported the timely processing, which includes most mail handling steps outside of pickup and delivery, of 93.3% of ballots on Election Day, its best processing score in several days, but still well below the 97% target that postal and voting experts say the agency should hit. The Postal Service processed 115,630 ballots on Tuesday, a volume much lower than in recent days after weeks of warnings about chronic mail delays. Of that number, close to 8,000 ballots were not processed on time, a small proportion, but one that could factor heavily in states such as Michigan and Wisconsin, which, by the way, that didn't help them whatsoever, because Biden won Michigan and Wisconsin.
And that's what Darren is telling you right now, is that not only did we already win with the votes they've counted, but even if they add in all these, we just won harder.
Mm-hmm. Earlier Tuesday, U.S. District Judge Emmett G. Sullivan of the District of Columbia had ordered the Postal Service to sweep 12 postal processing facilities that cover 15 states for ballots. But the agency rebuffed that order and said it would stick to its own inspection schedule, which voting rights advocates worried was too late in the day for found ballots to make it to vote counters. The directive came after the Postal Service disclosed that more than 300,000 ballots nationwide could not be traced. Those ballots received entry barcode scans at processing facilities, but not exit scans. The agency said the likelihood of that many ballots being misplaced was very low. Mail clerks have been ordered to sort ballots by hand in many locations, and items that were pulled out for expedited delivery were not given an exit scan. Let me call bullshit on that right there. They have not hand-sorted mail in ages in any postal facility. Let me stress.
I'm sorry, I'm just going to interrupt to ask, because other people might be wondering too. Even after getting rid of all those ballot sorting machines, would that have pushed them into having to, if they got rid of them?
If they got rid of them, probably.
Because that might be what they tried to do on purpose, for that specific purpose.
Exactly. Well, let me just tell you, the U.S. Postal Service does not hand sort anything unless it is too damaged to go through a machine.
Unless they're trying to slow down the votes being counted or eliminate them.
Because the mail handling needs to be automated to keep their numbers up. They have to track their numbers, and they have to report it to Washington every single day.
And now that they reported them and everybody sees that they were hand sorting, hopefully they'll put them in jail.
Hand sorting a mail was eliminated because it's not efficient.
Too slow.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense then. That's exactly why he's doing it.
And I can tell you who they put in hand sorting besides the clerks that bid into that job. They also take injured employees that can still work, but
back injuries
but are on limited duty or light duty. You put them in hand sort. You're just sitting there and you're just casing mail all day. But there's hardly enough mail to hand sort because everything's run through automation.
Right.
Unbelievable.
And these are all things that there was foresight into all this, so that's why Trump's using all of this to his advantage and making the wild claims that he's making, because he's got insight. He knows how all this is happening, you know?
Allison Ziv, an attorney representing the NAACP, which brought the lawsuit against the Postal Service with other civil and voting rights groups, said, quote, "We know yesterday that if the sweeps were doing their job, mail that was identified as ballots and were in the system should have been pulled out and delivered. And it may be that affects what we see as the scores. The problem is in part because of the timing and in part because they haven't given us all the information we asked for. It's hard to know whether the numbers we saw today, the low scores, for example, in Atlanta and central Pennsylvania, it's hard to assess how big a problem that is. End of quote. And guess what 2 states have thin margins?
Oh,
Georgia
and Pennsylvania.
There you go, folks. I'm just going to stop right there because I will get mad. No, it is beyond time for Judge Sullivan to get the U.S. Marshal Service, grab DeJoy, and arrest him and haul his ass in front of the court. And if he doesn't give a proper explanation, drop the jail on him. Now.
Honestly.
Do it now.
Where is our U.S. Marshal Service? Why is nobody going in and holding anybody accountable for these blatant violations of constitutional rights? Like, I guess I don't know. The postal office isn't necessarily a constitutional right, but when you're manipulating,
actually, it is. Is
it in the Constitution?
They are wrote in the Constitution. It is the only government agency that is mandated by the U.S. Constitution.
Ah, well, excellent. So then, why? It's certainly he's not the only guy that is thwarting the Constitution right now that Trump has appointed, and nobody's holding anybody accountable. Mm-hmm. That really stresses me out. We got to do something. Like the police are not just here to come after the working class. That I know that's what they think they're here for, but we need to use them for what we actually fund them for.
Exactly. I've got a couple of stories that we really need to get to. I'm still pissed about what happened in Texas last week. The Trump train going after the Biden bus that had former Texas Representative Wendy Davis on it.
Attempting to run them off the road.
Yep. The FBI is investigating. There needs to be prosecutions, severe prosecutions.
I hope the FBI is also investigating why people suddenly have ram bars on every vehicle that I see now. Why DTE trucks have the ram bars that you normally would only see on the front of a police officer car, a police car.
A police cruiser, yeah.
So here's my concern. Big Utility is already helping the police with stuff like Shot Spotter and installing campaign signs and all the stuff on their property. Are they going to use their cars now too? After if the Republicans are successful in inciting their civil war, are we really up against DTE, consumers' power, the private military, the Republican Party? Is that what we're up against? Because it feels that way. So.
Yep. And we have another election news to talk about. This is out of Chile. This is from the BBC, dated October 26th.
Oh, my.
With almost all ballots counted, 78% of Chileans have voted yes in a referendum to rewrite Chile's constitution, which dates back to the military rule of General Augusto Pinochet. So,
this is huge.
This is very huge. I might put up, we have some audio from back in 2016. I had a intern at the radio station named Leah Caparelli who lived in Chile for a while.
My last roommate was Chilean.
And she has a great perspective. I actually spent 2 hours in studio with her talking about what was happening in Chile at the time.
We should get my old roommate. He lives right down the road, and I bet he would come and talk to us a bit. But yeah, he used to live there, and his family's there, and I've been kind of watching the uprisings there over the last couple of years. I didn't expect it. I didn't even realize. I didn't see this article this week.
Yep, and I want to mention something that my mom said about the election. I actually put it on my Facebook. This is a direct quote. My 82-year-old mother, I hope I never have to see that sucker on television ever again.
That resonates
Bingo.
with me.
And you know what, Mom? I hope you're right.
I agree with that, Mom. What's Mom's name? Can I just call her Mom?
Just call her Mom.
Okay, thanks, Mom.
Yeah, no, she doesn't want to be on the radio. I've tried to get her on the radio.
She should be. I think Mom's the one.
Yeah, so.
That apple didn't fall far from the tree, did it, Darren?
Yeah, so I'm hoping everything stays as it is and we have President Joe Biden. So
that's up to us. Let's make it happen.
Yep. We'll be back next week. Hopefully we'll have everything settled down by then. I'm Darren Gibson.
And I'm Katy Steele for Jack Prince.
For Kristen Cook, please support independent media and the First Amendment.
The stations that carry Southpaws do not necessarily share the opinions expressed on the show. Southpaws is protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution and is copyrighted by Big D Entertainment. All rights reserved.